let's get right to Adam Brandon. He is the president and CEO of Freedom Works. Adam, great to have you with us again, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me this morning.
So, Adam, a $2.2 trillion looks like it's going to pass today. Only one Republican squawking about it. That's Massey in Kentucky. He's going to be shouted down. It's a goodie bag. There's some good things in it, but then, you got $25,000 to $25 million to increase expenses for Congress. What that has to do with coronavirus, I have no idea.
Right.
You got $25 million for the Kennedy Center. You got $50 million for NPR. I don't know what NPR needs another $50 million for, but you got a lot of garbage in this bill. But like the president said, I had to make some compromises. Give us your take.
Well, my first take on the bill is I wish it would have been a completely different process. I wish that Congress would have stayed in session rather than leave, especially in the middle of a national crisis, and did a series of smaller bills. Do a dozen, do 20 micro-targeted bills at specific problems. I'm not one to say you're not going to spend a lot of money in this crisis. You're going to have to. But here we are. We're at the finish line. There are some good things in the bill. The importance for small business. John, small business is getting hammered right now. And small business is the backbone of the country.
Yes.
And it's terrifying when you think that if this would continue for another 6 to 8 weeks, I've seen estimates to up to a third of our small businesses in this country would go out of business.
Yes.
So this bill will provide the liquidity to see these folks through for the next couple of months.
Yes.
Look, I know I have people in my family who work in the restaurant industry, and they were working one day, and the next day they have no prospects for a job for an extended period of time. They're going to seek some relief. So American families are going to see relief. Small businesses are going to see relief. And yes, some large businesses and industries are also going to see relief. The price tag is staggering, but look, what I'm more concerned about is recovering from the coronavirus as a country, getting the economy moving again as quickly as possible, and then once the economy is moving and growing, we're going to have to figure out some ways to get real serious here about how you can make sure that you can increase our revenues and decrease our spending.
Everybody understands that we had to have this liquidity in the market. I'm a small business owner. We employ people. We don't know what the future holds. All the small business operators that I've talked to in the last week, probably about 50 of them, we all say the same thing. We can get through a month, maybe 6 weeks. This thing goes on for 90 days. A lot of these businesses are just going to fold, and they can't reopen. And what gets me is the imbeciles, the policymakers that have never owned a business, never signed the front of a check, don't know how the economy works. Most of them in there, Adam, have never even had a job out of the public sector, right? They went from college to prosecutor, college to public policy, college to something. Now they're in Congress. They've never had a job in the private sector. So they think you can just turn the switch on and off. So my question is, probably 6 weeks, probably the middle of May, something like that. The president says Easter. What is your view on when we get an all clear? Because we're never going to have people that say they want to bend the curve down. Nobody can give me a metric. Like, what does that mean? 5% increase, 20% decrease? Nobody can tell me a number. What happens, Adam, Brandon?
Well, I think there's one number I do know is this will not slow down until 60% of the population has been exposed to the virus.
Right.
And that is a stunning number. So when you're bending the curve, you're just preventing it from going to that number very, very quickly and overwhelming our healthcare services. Right. My guess is that when we open up is after this virus runs for a few weeks and the testing is just everywhere. Right now, it's like you have to meet certain criteria to get the testing. My guess is in a month or hopefully even less than that, these tests are all over the place. And then you're going to start to slowly reopen the economy, letting healthy people go to work, healthy younger people who are not in the high-risk categories start to go back to work. And I'm optimistic that you'll start to see that by May. And then hopefully by June, you could just take the shackles off and the whole economy is ripping by June. But to your point you're saying earlier, I always treat the economy like a machine, and if there's too much damage, and if this economy had to sit for I couldn't, my jaw dropped here, some people say through August. It may be absolutely impossible to start that engine.
That's insane.
And you'd be looking at about a Great Depression. So then you got to ask yourself, is the cure worse than the disease? So no, you've got to, in May, you've got to get real serious about opening up as much as you possibly can.
So how do we do that, Adam? And that's why I wanted you on today, because you're a believer in freedom and liberty. You're the president and CEO of Freedom Works. By the way, you can follow Freedom Works on Twitter at Freedom Works. Adam, that's why I wanted you on today. So the president can say, okay, it's time to get back to work. Let's say he does that, I don't know, pick a date, April 23rd.
Right.
You know what? We've bent the curve down to what I think is the number, but nobody will ever agree on what the number is. We got to get back to work. But the states that have governors are all powerful. They're now, like Michigan governor, telling neighbors to rat out neighbors if they're walking their dog over twice a day. So the question is, the governors have the power now, and if they say, no, we're not going to reopen, what happens, Adam?
Well, then you start to have a problem. I think that you want the governors to have leeway if there is let's say, a hot outbreak. You take any major city or region. If things are getting pretty bad in an area, you may need some different, more extreme measures there. I personally am very glad that the president did not do this national lockdown, because there are parts of this country that are not that infected. And so to allow a little bit of economic life to continue there, I think, is important. Now, again, I go back to how do you get out of this? You need to start doing testing. There's another test that's not as important right now, but will be. How many of your listeners think they may have had this, or they have had someone who they know someone who looks like they had this? I had an illness in February that my doctor called me and said, if coronavirus was known in February, my shortness of breath and fatigue, I really nailed the what it sounded like. So there's a test that's going to be happening to see if you've developed antibodies. Once you start getting these tests out there, and by the way, even when you open up the economy, it's not going to be just like it was. People who are at risk, people like my parents, they are going to need to stay sheltered in place in Ohio until this lifts. But someone like me, I could start getting back to work after you start seeing some tests. We're going to continue to do the social distancing, but you're going to, when you do that, you just got to know this thing is going to continue for a while, but we just cannot leave the economy closed indefinitely.
Well, then you have no virus, but then you have no job and no country. So, I mean, when the president says, Adam Brandon, there's a balance, that's really what the balance is. I mean, you have to balance it off. People will die. There's no question. It could be either of us. People are going to die. We understand that. But as the president said yesterday, and I've been saying for a month, their mortality rate is going to be well under 1% as the test goes up. Probably, I think, about 0.5%. Getting the regular flu, it's 0.1%. So it's, 5x, 6x. Not good, but not 5%, which is some of what the doomsdays are saying. All right, let's get to...
This is not the plague.
It's not the plague. Thank you. All right, let's get to Steve Bannon. I syndicate him, as you know, on the radio across America. We got into a big debate. I think it was the end of last week. I know you're with me on this, but Bannon has been calling for a nationwide lockdown, the president to call that for 30 days to what he says shatter the curve. I oppose that. I thought that would be a catastrophe for the economy. I don't think we could ever recover from that. And I don't think you need to do that. Was I right, or was Steve right?
Well, I look at only history will tell all of this, but my guess is that because of the precautions that we are taking, we are bending that curve. And going to zero is that's one thing we have to understand about this disease. You're never going to get to zero.
Right.
It's got to spread through. I think it was important to leave just a little bit of wiggle room in there. I've had family and relatives that have needed to go from Florida to Boston to go. My sister-in-law was working by herself down in Florida, and she wanted to go be with parts of her family in Boston. Well, you got to let that stuff happen. You had to let people get out and about to get their supplies. And as long as what I observed out there, I mean, yeah, you see the video of people fighting over toilet paper, but for the most part, my interactions were pleasant, were friendly, there was a nice sense of community. as people went to the grocery store and stocked up on their goods and stood in extra long lines. You needed to get that. Now, I think we're heading into that period right now for at least through mid-April. I think things are going to be pretty locked down. I live right by Ronald Reagan Airport, and one thing that's amazing to me is how few flights are coming in and out. And then it's also amazing to me when you see the planes take off. They take off so early in the runway because you could tell they're empty. So for the most part, I think this is about as extreme as a lockdown as I think you can see Americans take. And if I was not allowed to leave my house, I'd go on a couple daily walks every day. And I'm not hugging people on the way, but there's a nice little community of people moving around. But boy, if I had to stay in my house, period, for a few weeks, I think I'd go insane. So my wife and I are trying to do our best to get out at least in the fresh air once or twice a day.
Well, one psychologist said that a national lockdown would cause the family split-up rate, the divorce rate, if you will, to skyrocket.
Well, Wuhan, when they opened up the civil offices in China, where Wuhan lockdown was, on day one, the first thing that happened was divorces soared after spending so many weeks in lockdown. So that's a true fact out of China.
Right. Well, now in my family, it's the exact opposite. It's the exact opposite. My wife is so excited that I'm home every day. Not. So,
John, I am a person. I put on 230,000 air miles last year for my job, and I spent a lot of time in airports, and I'm still getting used to the fact that that I'm sitting here in my house talking to you, and not some hotel room in Poughkeepsie.
That's exactly it. When we said I've got a studio in Washington. I'm not there. I have a studio in Richmond. And so I've got a studio in Chesapeake where I am now, which is actually in my home. So that's where I've got to do my own show from. But I am getting out today. I'm going live at my other Virginia Chesapeake studio this evening at 7 p.m. So it's like I just got to get out of the house. But it has been interesting. We're with Adam Brandon. Adam is the president and CEO of Freedom Works. You can follow them on Twitter at Freedom Works, or go to freedomworks.com. He's a champion of liberty in America. I'm going to make you put on your prediction hat. When am I going to sit at a baseball stadium and see a Major League Baseball game with another 35,000 people? Am I going to see that in 2020?
I think you will see that in 2020. I think if I was going to predict, I think the economy will start opening up to healthy working age people in May. I think you're going to see the social distancing continue through, say, July, and I believe it's going to be the late summer, August, before you start going out to a baseball or a football game. It'll be the fall. So I would say open up in May. Some normality starts in June, but it's really going to be the end, the middle of the summer, the end of summer, July, August, if things go well, that we're able to start resuming normal life.
Well, that sounds like we got to wait till football, right? I mean, MLB, first they said May 15th. That's not going to happen. Then they said 6/1, they're going to resume play. I don't think anybody really said, because, putting 30 or 50,000 people in a baseball stadium, everybody's going to complain about that. I don't see that. And then that brings us to July. I mean, you could have a shortened season starting in mid-July, but as soon as you get to August, I mean, you just can't play enough games. It's over.
Well, I before the lockdown happened, when things were kind of scary, I was on a train coming back from Philadelphia to D.C., and I remember it was the beginning of the spring. I think I had a little touch of allergies, and I needed to blow my nose. And normally you just get a Kleenex out, you blow your nose, and that's the way you do things. And I was so scared to blow my nose in public for fear of how people would react that I had walked to the end of the train and into the bathroom to do that. And I thought about that. It's like, if you're going to be in a situation, again, when the economy opens, we're still going to be having these cases. It just won't be as raw and severe. So it is going to be a little while where until we're going to be comfortable being in mass public places. But I think the thing for someone like me is to reopen the economy. I need to get back on airplanes. So when is that date going to be? And I'm expecting that to be more the June, July date of when I'm going to feel comfortable enough to know this disease has passed through enough of the population that with proper precautions, I can get on an airplane.
All right, we're with Adam Brandon, President CEO of FreedomWorks. So, Adam, what you're saying is get back to work in May. Things gradually open up in June and July. Things get better. August, we're back to normal. Is that what I've heard?
That's what
That's your best case?
And your numbers that you're giving on how lethal this is, I think are spot on.
Thank you.
Remember, we had 50,000 people who died of the flu this year. So as the numbers continue in April and May, we're probably going to give flu deaths a run for their money, and that is just a staggering statement to make, but that's the truth. And if that's the case, once you get over that hump, then things can start to get back to normal again. And this is a terrible time we find ourselves in. I mean, this is why you have a $2 trillion bill moving, because it's so extraordinary. And but I just don't think that things are going to loosen up in the next couple of weeks. But hey, let's make the best of it here. I mean, I am actually really enjoying all the time I'm spending with my wife now.
Well, so am I. Adam, let me ask you one more question. I got 2 minutes. The entire budget, the federal budget for 2020 was $5 trillion. That's the entire budget, 4.65. This package is 2.2 trillion. You add the other stuff we did, the whole thing is about 2.5, which is over 50% of our entire budget. We only projected to get $3.5 trillion in taxes in. Now that's going to go down. I mean, there's payrolls been put off, taxes, and there's going to be abuse in the system like we always have. So the taxes are going to go down to probably well under $3 trillion. So the deficit's going to go up by another, $3 trillion? So when we get out of this thing, you go to 2021, you're going to have a deficit of $27 trillion. At what point does it break?
Yeah, I have some friends in finance, and I asked them that, and they look at the Japanese model, and the Japanese have about a 210, 220% debt to GDP ratio, and we're trading at closer to 100% debt to GDP ratio. The question is, we don't know. As long as this is the best run country and economy in the world, most productive people in the world, people will be willing to loan us money. Now, the other question first, though, is where's that money coming from?
China.
Well, John, this gets me a little nervous there. It is coming from China. It's also, my guess is you're going to be doing that old switcheroo game where the Treasury prints and the Federal Reserve buys. So one hand is feeding the other. That's kind of scary. I don't know how that's supposed to work in the long run. You're literally printing the money. So it's going to be a combination. You said it, like the money that we are trying to buy. I mean, it will be coming from places like China and all over the world who are buying this debt. I don't know, but my guess is we're getting into uncharted territory, and this is scary, and we could see the end of coronavirus. The problem is if you get into a sovereign debt crisis and people are questioning the full faith and credit of the United States and the United States economy, that's going to be a harder crisis to get out of, and we absolutely need to make sure our economy is as productive as possible so that we don't have to have that reckoning someday.
Adam, thanks for being with us. I want to thank Adam Brandon, President and CEO of FreedomWorks. Follow them on Twitter at FreedomWorks. Go to freedomworks.com. Adam's been fighting for liberty and freedom for a very long time. Adam, thanks for being with us, man.
Thanks very much for having me today. Appreciate it.